观众朋友们，大家好今天是3月11号。
Good afternoon. My name is Adrian Dix. I'm BC's Minister of Health. To my right is Dr. Bonnie Henry, BC's Provincial Health Officer. It's our COVID-19 briefing for Thursday, March the 11th for British Columbia.
3月11号是周四
We're honored to be here on the territory of the
这个卫生厅长先自我介绍，今天早了1分钟，
Esquimalt First Nations. Today is the first
早了2分钟。
of the declaration of the pandemic for the World Health Organization. It's a day for us to be solemn because of those that we've lost and those that have lost so much in the pandemic, but also to be very proud of our extraordinary team of healthcare workers and all the people of British Columbia who responded in a generous, thoughtful, and kind way. And it's now my honor to introduce Dr. Bonnie Henry.
这个敬意对那些工作在前线的医护人员、急救人员。
Thank you very much, and indeed this has been a year.
他说1年了，真正好好1年。
We're going to walk through a little bit of what that year
稍微回顾一
looked
下
like
这
in
1年
terms
里
of
边怎么来
the
的，
data
怎
that
么
we
过
have
来
here
的。
in BC.
我有一些数据可以分享
I
一下。
think to start though, I
那么
will
今天呢，
just
还是
update us on the
开始
numbers for today.
新增
We've had 569 new cases
569
today, 3 of which were epidemiologically
有
linked,
3个是
bringing our
疑似的。
total to 86,219 people in BC who have been diagnosed with COVID-19. That includes 140 people in the Vancouver Coastal Health Region, 301 people who live in the Fraser Health Region, 41 in the Vancouver Island Health Region, 26 people in Interior Health, 60 people in Northern Health, and a new case in somebody who normally lives outside of Canada. So we now have 4,912 active cases in the province, of whom 244 are in hospital and 68 are in intensive care or ICU. We have over 8,000 now, 900 people under active public health monitoring, and 79,000 people, 79,829 people who have recovered or are no longer infectious.
Our whole family is missing time at our home in Florida this year, and maybe you are too. But this provides a
And on this day that we remember everything that's happened over this past year, we've had 3 new deaths to report here in British Columbia, bringing our total to 1,397 people who have lost their lives due to COVID-19. And again, we remember, of course, the families who are mourning the loss of their loved ones during this difficult time. We have one outbreak that's been declared over at the Westside Care Residence, and now are down to 9 active outbreaks in long-term care assisted living and independent living, and 8 in acute care. I'm going to now go to our modeling presentation to give you an update of where we are in terms of the pandemic. And what we've talked about is really most of these data will show you a summary of where we have been in this past year. We know that our pandemic started before this date, but it is March 11th. That was the official declaration of a pandemic by the World Health Organization. This first slide tells us about the geographic distribution of our cases in British Columbia by health service delivery area, which is the broader health area. And as you can see, there has been no part of our province that has been spared from dealing with this virus. On the right-hand side, in the shades of gray, is the last 7 days, and we see as well that while we have cases all over the province, some areas are dealing with a more difficult situation than others, particularly in the Fraser South area and now in the Northwest. Breaking that down by smaller local health area, we see again that there is no part of this province that has not been affected in the past year, and some more than others. And this gives us a much more detailed sense of our communities and the community impact
社区所被这个新冠造成的分散。这个是7天的，刚才是1年的，现在是7天的。
And as we can see, there continues to be hotspots in areas of the province, particularly now around Prince Rupert, but also an ongoing challenge in areas in the Fraser Valley.
飞沙地区还是比较困难。
This is a summary of our epidemiologic curves and our hospitalizations and deaths over the past year.
这个数字，蓝颜色的是总共的获得数字，4601呢是住院的，1391个是死亡的，那个78000多就是被隔离解除的。
And the higher proportion of people, the more serious cases, were the ones that we detected early. We did have a bit of a reprieve during the spring and summer, which we all remember, of course. But the virus did not go away, and we saw it again resurge as we moved into the fall. We were rumbling along at a fairly low and controlled level, but when we got to the middle of October, we started to see rapidly increasing cases. And as the numbers of people being infected increased and spread exponentially, more people required hospitalizations, and sadly more people have died. We've now seen that our peak was somewhere in early December. We've come down since then. We had a little bit of an upswing again after holiday season and over Christmas and New Year's season, but we have been on a steady downward trajectory until about the middle of February. Since then, we started to climb up again, slowly and steadily, but we now are at a level that we are our 7-day rolling average has increased. But if we look at the statistics, what we see is that our hospitalizations has leveled out and come down. And really importantly, the number of people who are dying from COVID-19 has also decreased dramatically. So those curves are starting to separate.
这个也是很重要的。
This is the same data presented by health authority, and this is by surveillance date, so we can see in the dotted line our rolling 7-day average, and it reflects again the fact that the majority of our cases and our concerns continue to be in the Fraser Health region and the Vancouver Coastal Health region, and in both of those areas we know are the most populated areas of the province. But we have seen increases and we've seen waves go through in every part of the province. When we look at this by what we call episode date, so that is by the date of onset of illness, that gives us a slightly different pattern, because the previous data that we talked about was the day that the lab test was done or the day it was reported. When we look back on when people were infected, we see a little bit more of a clustering and less pronounced peaks. This is to give us a sense of where we're seeing cases being connected to, and most of them still are related to clusters that we're seeing in our community. And we shared some information about what these look like, whether it's getting together at a small gathering for a wedding, and certainly the virus being transmitted to others there, who then take it to their homes and their workplaces, their schools, their childcare centers. We know that this virus can spread underground before we notice sometimes that it is causing an outbreak. And part of that has to do with the age of people who are being affected. Early on in the pandemic, last March and April, we were mostly seeing older people being affected, and that is because we were monitoring in people who are more likely to end up in hospital. As we progress through the summer and into the fall, and again in the winter, what we're seeing is that the transmission of the virus is being driven by two age groups of people primarily, and that is young people, 19 to 39, and also the age group from 40 to 59. So those are the two curves at the top. There are two scenarios where we're seeing transmission now. The most that transmission that we're seeing occurs when people are getting together, and even now in smaller gatherings, whether it's for social events, having a group together for a birthday party in one's home, meeting up with people in indoor environments, we know is the riskiest part. And the other part that we're seeing a lot of transmission events is in workplaces, and many of those workplaces are places where people cannot effectively separate on an ongoing basis, and the risk is higher. And some of those places we know are workplaces that we need to keep things going, like our food processing centers, like retail sorting centers. And we have been focused very much on our COVID safety plans in those settings, and when they're followed and when people are able to follow them consistently, we know they work. The positive news that we see in this is that the high rates that we were seeing in people over age 80 since October, November have now gradually come down, and largely that reflects the important protection that people are receiving in long-term care, assisted living, and as of the last few weeks, independent living, and our seniors and elders in our community. If we look at what the testing tells us over time and the percent positivity overall in BC, we saw high rates of testing early in the fall, and that continued through the winter months as the numbers of cases continued to increase in our communities. But it was not the same around the province. We know that in Fraser Health and Vancouver Coastal, where access to testing was ramped up and was quite available rapidly, we saw increases in transmission that reflected that. We've now come down and are hovering around 7 to 8% in both of those health authorities. Interior Health had several peaks and has now come down again, and we see the same pattern in Vancouver Island, where we have more challenges are many communities around the north, where testing is not always as easy to access, and where we have had to deploy some of the more rapid testing, and where we have seen connectivity between communities and people moving between communities and inadvertently bringing the virus with them. And that right now is reflected in what we're seeing in places like Prince Rupert. Overall, we continue to follow the impact of the pandemic on people by different age groups, to try and understand who is most at risk. And this has remained consistent over the past year. We still are seeing relatively fewer cases than the population in young children, but we see more cases in people between 20 and 60, and an increase in people who require hospital care, ICU care, and sadly, a dramatic increase in people who are severely affected or dying from COVID-19 over the age of 70.
那个浅绿色的是重症监护，所以从这个年龄上看，20以上开始有死亡以及有重症监护，越是到年龄大，这个黑颜色的越高。
And that is a tragedy that we now know can be prevented.
这个就需要，因为现在都有疫苗了，所以都可以。
We've also been following the impact of the pandemic on young people, and particularly the new syndrome, the multi-inflammatory syndrome in children, which has been identified as sometimes occurring after infection with COVID-19. We have had 10 cases confirmed in children in British Columbia, among the over 10,000 children between the ages of 8 and 18 who have been affected. 7 required ICU admissions, but all thankfully have recovered or are in stable condition, and we have had no children die. As we know, the majority of the cases were in the Fraser Health and Vancouver Coastal Health region, and that's where we see the majority of the MISC cases as well. One of the things that helps us understand the impact of a new virus or a condition on our population is looking at its impact on overall deaths. And the number of deaths or the mortality rate that we see is relatively stable in a large population. On average, we have about 7,500 people who die every year in British Columbia, given our demographics and our age group, and that is relatively stable over time. Recently, StatsCan just put out some data around this measure for all of Canada, and it showed that in all of Canada for the year of 2020, so just from January 1st to December 31st of 2020, there was a 5% increase above expected numbers of people who've died in Canada. And that translates to about 14,000 extra deaths in the country. Many of those were related to COVID-19, primarily in Ontario and Quebec. We've also seen that data coming out of the United States shows that with the measures that they've had in place there and the impact of the pandemic, they had a 15% increase in all-cause mortality, in people who died in that country during 2020. And that is the largest increase that they have had since the 1918 influenza pandemic. It is the third leading cause of death in the United States in 2020. When we look at British Columbia over the last 10 years, from 2009 to 2020, what we see is that the measures and the work that we did in British Columbia together to try and protect people from this virus meant that we have had a slight increase in people who've died in our all-cause mortality in this province. But we have not seen a dramatic increase that has been seen in other parts of the country or in other countries. And we know that there are two things going on in BC right now. We have this COVID-19 pandemic, which has had impacts on some populations, and we have our overdose crises, which also contributes to excess mortality that we have seen in 2020. If we look at this in some more detail, for a virus that was not even known until we didn't have even cases until into February of, or late January of 2020. Yet now, for the entire year, COVID-19 was the eighth top cause of death in the province. And that may not seem like much, but it is an important marker that it is in the top reasons that people have been affected. And it tells us that this has had a profound effect on our population. The other thing that I will note, though, is number 5 on our all-cause top 15 causes of death in British Columbia is illicit drug toxicity. So again, the impact of the overdose crisis that we have in the province. And on the right is a measure of what we call potential years of life lost. So we know that some things affect younger people more than older people. And what we have seen is if we look at the potential years of life lost from COVID-19, that drops it as a cause of death to 11. What that tells us is what we've just seen, that COVID-19 has had a profound impact on older people in our communities, and the overdose deaths have had a profound effect on younger people in our communities. And the two of these are what we have had to deal with together here in British Columbia. If we compare, as we do periodically, what has happened here, our pandemic here in British Columbia compared to other provinces in Canada, what we have seen is that we've had a low and steady rate. We have had an increase, as we know, in the fall and winter, but we've not seen some of the dramatic increases and decreases. And this is in the context of our plans and our ability to, as much as we can, keep as many things open as we can
那么他也是说到了我们要考虑到平衡能够给大家重启就重启，所以这个也是包括了学校包括了零售商店等等那么从去年的秋天春天开始我们没有开学校，那么所以我们把重启学校呢作为重点之重这个也是能够使得学校能够这个能够这个正常运作。
Again, looking at the people who died and our death rates in British Columbia compared to other provinces, we have tried and maintained a low and steady rate, and that thankfully is dropping off now. If we compare what happened in British Columbia, our pandemic, to some other countries, particularly ones that we know have been quite hard hit, like Italy, like the USA and the UK, we see again that we have quite low rates compared to international comparisons. And the same applies to the death rates that we've seen here, sadly, in British Columbia. Some of the things that we have been following more recently that concern us and we worry will have an impact on our pandemic for the next period of time are the variants of concern. And we have been watching these carefully. This is just a schematic to show you that our surveillance and our testing for these variants has changed as we've developed new tests that are able to be a marker or an indicator of who has one of these more concerning variants that are associated with increased transmissibility of the virus. So it is a change to this. A change to the spike protein that may mean that it's easier for that strain of the virus to bind to our receptors in our nose and throat and therefore transmit more easily. What we had from the beginning was a three-pronged approach, doing some sampling, a random sampling of some of the viruses that were submitted in samples, positive samples from around the province, targeting where we're seeing outbreaks or clusters to see if any of the variants of concern were involved, and then some of the targeted surveillance, for example, for people who have traveled. What we've now moved to is a more standardized surveillance where all of the tests that are done every day that are positive are then put through a screening test, and that's in the green on this example, the screening test to see if they have one of the variants of concern, the N501Y. That is one of the ones that's a marker, and those ones then go on to whole genome sequencing. So right now, we are, it takes about an extra day for the screening test to be done. And then after that, 3 to 5 days for the whole genome sequencing, so we know exactly which variant it is, or if it is a variant at all, because some of these turn out not to be. So when we report on a daily basis the number of variant cases, they're not in addition to the new cases that we report every day or in the 7-day average. What they are is a 2 to 3 day lag for the ones that we had reported a few days ago, and it is now being sped up so that we are able to detect more rapidly when we have a variant case. What we have seen with this surveillance that we've been doing is that we have seen an increase in the numbers of cases that turn out to be transmitted. Are a variant of concern, and the most common one we have is the B117, which has been associated with the UK. And we're seeing it most commonly in the Fraser Health and the Vancouver coastal area, but particularly in Fraser Health. The second most common one is the B1351, which is the variant associated with South Africa, and we've seen small numbers of that, and not as many, certainly not increasing numbers over time. More recently, we did have one cluster with a new variant, the Brazil variant. It's marked as P1 on this. They were all associated with one group cluster in the Vancouver coastal health region, and we've not seen additional transmission from that group. So these are things we're watching very carefully. We need to understand what the impact is of these variants. We are following up as public health, making it a priority to understand the case and contact management of people who have these variants, because we have seen what has happened in other parts of the world when they start to take off. Right now, we are still in a very small percentage of our cases that are variants of concern, and what we are seeing is that with the same measures that we have in place to prevent transmission, including supporting close contacts to be able to effectively isolate, doing testing of close contacts to make sure that they aren't infected before they're released from quarantine, those measures are working. We're not seeing rapid takeoff of variant cases like we have seen reported today from Ontario, for example, where about 40% of the cases. We're still under 10%, but we are seeing that these are increasing, which tells us that every transmission in the community where these are moving on to others puts a little bit more risk into the scenarios that we have. So if you're somebody who's with a group of people, and most people are only passing it on to one person. We know that if you have this variant, you may pass it on to more people more easily. But I do want to put this in a bit of perspective for us here in British Columbia. We are looking at whole genome sequencing of the over 12,000 now variants or lineages that we see in British Columbia since the start of this pandemic, and we can see that this virus changes. And changes not as quickly as some other viruses, but it does change over time, and we have many different variants that are circulating here in BC. And if we focus really just on the two variants of concern that we've seen most often, they are still rare compared to other viruses that are circulating in our communities. And we know that the same measures that we need, that we have been doing, are effective against these ones as well. So that is important for us to pay attention to. We can't let these ones take hold. We need to pay attention to those situations where transmission is more common, and that's indoor settings, when we're close together with people, when we're not wearing our masks, when we're talking loudly. Those are the things that we need to continue to avoid so that we don't give this virus a chance to change. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the light
这个是疫苗了啊！疫苗现在是34万，到昨天为止8号为止343381例了。那么这个呢，他说随着疫苗的到货量增加，那么这个会急速增长。
And over 250,000 people have had the protection from a single dose. Though that protection takes time, takes several weeks, but we know from the information from the vaccine studies, the vaccine effectiveness studies that we started at the very beginning when we had the first vaccine here in December. We made a research team at the BC CDC. It was important for us and continues to be important for us to monitor every single dose and make sure for safety reasons, but also so we can monitor the impact of the virus. And this work has allowed us to understand the protection that we get even in situations like long-term care homes with our most vulnerable seniors and elders, that we can have excellent protection from a single dose. And that is what has supported us to be able to make that really important decision to extend the interval for second doses so that we can protect more people more quickly and win that race that we are in right now. So this is the data that helped us make those decisions. It shows very clearly that once 2 to 3 weeks have passed, we have a rapid drop-off in risk for people who have been immunized. And it was as high as 89% after 3 weeks. But we know as well that we need to continue to monitor this, and we will continue to ensure that we're watching to make sure the protection is
这
lasting.
张数据也很重要。
This is the similar data presented slightly differently. It looks at people who are in long-term care on the right and healthcare workers on the left. And what we can see is within 2 weeks of
这个也是我
immunization,
们
we
的
start to see a
长期护理
dramatic
院以及
change in risk.
那个
So those are things that we will continue to
医护人
monitor
员
as
他们
more
打了
and
疫
more
苗之
people
后
are protected
这
in
个
the
获
coming
得阳
weeks.
性数据急剧下降。
And I want to end off with looking at our
那么
models
最后
because
呢，
these
看
are
看就
things that
是
help
每
us
个卫生
understand where
局
we've
根
been
据我
and
们
the
的
potential for where
这
we
个
might
模型
be
分析
in the
之后
future,
将来的
particularly
走势
in
是
the
怎么样？
next few weeks.
那么现
The
在呢
next 2 weeks
RT 值基本上还
are
是
what is going
就
to
是一例传一
give us
例。
a sense of where we are
我
going
们
to
BC
be
省
come April.
你
Right
看
now,
到了
what we
飞
are
沙
seeing
又往下走了，
is a reflection
但
of
是
the
呢，内
activities
陆
that
我
we
有点
did
点往上
and the
升，
risks that we took or didn't
岛
take
上往下
2
走
weeks
很
ago.
多，
And what
北
we
部
can see
几
here
乎
in
不动。
BC that our reproductive number has been hovering along 1, but it's not the same everywhere in the province.
他说基
And
本上
we know that,
还是
we want
RT
it
值
to
就
drop
是
below
一例
1,
传几
and
例
when we
这个
have
平均值。
concerns, variants of concern that are more transmissible, we need to get it even
我们
further
所以不希
below
望
1.
能够
And
看
that is
到这个
about the
病毒
risky
能够
contacts that we
更
have
传
with
播。
others. So infectious contacts. So that's the time when you went with a small group of people and in your workplace and you took your masks off, or you had a coffee break together with
所以
others,
希望
or
大
you
家呢，
had
就
that
算是
other
在
family into your home
不要放松
without
警
taking
惕
those
不要轻易
precautions.
的
Those are
这
the
个
risky
放弃口罩，也
connections.
不要
If
轻
we
易
do
的和
those
大
with
家
maintaining our
长时间
distance,
的密闭环境里
keeping our
边
numbers
团
small,
聚在一
wearing
起，
our
特别是
masks
在
when we can't maintain
茶
our
席时
distance.
间喝
Those
咖
are
啡的时间
protected
等等，不要放
connections.
松
Those
警
are the
惕。
connections
这
that we
个
need
我们
now.
一定要
And what we
联系
see,
清
of
楚。
course, is that there's quite a lot of fluctuation with the smaller populations
所
in
以
the
我们
interior
特
Vancouver
别是你
Island
看
and
到
the
的
north.
这个人口
All
少
of
的
those
这
have
些卫
started
生
to come
局，
back
他们的
towards
这
1
个
and
上
under
下波动
1,
很大。
where our population is
特
the
别是
greatest
看到
and
了吗？
where
内
we have
陆
the
啊
most，
岛上
impact
卫生
has
局
been
啊
in the Fraser Health
看到因
region
为
and
他们人
Vancouver
口
Coastal.
少，
And
反而
once
这个
again, we're
RT 值
trending
巴拉
back
巴拉
towards
这
where
个
we
波
want
动
to
很
be,
大。
but we're not there yet. And the other models help
这个
us
就是
understand
我们
the
接下来的
risk and
趋
the
势也是
situation that we're in
如果
right
你
now.
放松警惕，就
So
往
what
上
we
走，
can
就这个
see
意思。
is for interior Vancouver Island and the north, we're trending nicely
那
downwards.
么内
Where
陆
we
啊、
have
岛上
concerns,
啊、
of
北
course,
部啊，还
is
是
the potential
慢慢
for
慢
what could
不要走
happen in
就走
Fraser
了
Health
啊
and in
那么
Vancouver
飞沙
Coastal.
和
And we
沿
know
岸
that's
还是重
because
灾区
that's。where the higher numbers of cases are,
每天
but
都是
also
新
the
增多
most
是他们最
population.
多的。
So that is where we need to pay even more
所以我们还
attention
是要
to
更
making
加
sure
密
that
切
our
的重视在
connections
这
with
些地
each
区
other,
的
those
人。
needed connections that
这
we
也
have,
就是我们
are
BC
done in a
省
safe
最
way.
广泛的地
And
区
what
的
this
人。
shows for BC is that much of what our future could be is driven by what happens in our populous areas in the lower mainland. And to end up, this is the scenarios that we could be looking at. So this is modeling, so this is not a prediction, but it is helps us understand the things that we need to do. Right now, the models show that we're somewhere around 50 to 60% of our normal infectious contact rates. In the past, when we know we can get it down to 40, 45, 50%, we can bend that curve back down. That's what we need to think about now. How can we do things to get us through this period of time as more and more people are protected from immunization, from these effective vaccines that we have? How can we do things safely now so that we're not having those potential transmission contacts in our communities right now?
社交啊，大家都要考虑清楚。好。
So to go back to our data, as I mentioned, we have to date given over 360,000 doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. And that will be continuing as we have more vaccines arriving this week, as more people are eligible, and as we have our parallel track, of course, with the AstraZeneca Serum Institute of India vaccines that have arrived this week. Today's modeling shows us how this pandemic has progressed in our province over the past year. And what we have seen very clearly, that no one is immune, no community is immune to the virus or the impacts that have come with it. And the pandemic is still very much with us. The most effective tools we have had to control the spread of the virus have been our public health actions, combined with all of our individual efforts. We have made the biggest difference by our individual actions that give us collective safety. Things like washing our hands, staying home when we're sick, getting tested, giving others the space to stay safe, staying apart from our friends and family, and not gathering together, especially indoors, following our public health restrictions and orders. It is essential, particularly when we're indoors, whether it's workplaces, whether it's visiting a shop, whether it's having in our schools or in our homes. Our COVID safety plans work when we follow them. And we now have another very powerful means to push back on the virus, and that is our safe and effective vaccines. And with each day that more people are immunized, that level of protection for all of us goes up. We are progressing, but we're not yet in a place where any of us can let go of this progress that we've made as much as we may want to. But what we can do is focus on those things that we can do safely. And right now, as the weather gets better, as we know we're heading into the period where the transmissibility will decrease, and we know we need that social connection, right now what we can do is safely move outside for some of those connections. As a result, and looking at where we are, the Provincial Health Officer Order on Gatherings and Events has been amended to allow for outdoor gatherings for up to 10 people. This means your children can have a play date with their friends over the March break, but with their same group of friends. And if they're in school, the group of friends that they're in a cohort with at school. You can meet friends outside and have a coffee, have a chat, have a connection, have a picnic in your park with your grandparents. Should you choose to meet with your family and friends, remember that those safety measures need to continue and need to be top of mind. We don't want to put people at risk right now when we know we have vaccines that will protect us in the very near future. So if you're seeing your grandparent and they've yet to be immunized, then continue to take those measures. Keep your distance. Do it outdoors. Wear a mask. I'd like to be clear. There are no changes to the current restrictions on indoor gatherings. Those are the things we need to pay most attention to. But there is an opportunity for us to stay together by staying apart when we're outside and to enjoy and take advantage of that. But no dinner parties. Don't ask your favorite restaurant to have a special event for you. Those are the types of situations where we've seen can lead to transmission that will undo all that we have accomplished. The restrictions that we have in bars and restaurants and pubs remain in effect. All of the restrictions that we need and we know work in our retail settings, in all of the businesses that are open, those we need to adhere to more than ever right now. And we must all continue to use our safety plans at work and school. This is slowly turning the dial. It's not flicking the switch. We know there are a couple of things that are happening in the next few weeks, and one of them is March break. And we encourage you to be a family, to go outside, to explore in your neighborhood. Next week as well, we have St. Patrick's Day coming up, and we know that for some people, that is a day where they like to gather together and have parties. And we know that alcohol sales can be a part of people losing inhibitions and perhaps forgetting their COVID safety plans. We have consulted with the food and beverage industry and had a number of conversations, and they as well are committed to keeping our community safe and making sure that we don't have those temptations that put their staff and their businesses at risk. We all recognize that importance. And in the spirit of that, my existing order for food and liquor service establishments will be amended
所以他说我对这个餐厅以及酒精的禁令又要改了。那么3月17号又是了，要今天这次早点宣布了，就是8点钟就关掉了。大家不要，上次是临时12月24号还是1月1号临时决定，就是早上所有的零售的卖酒的8点钟就结束。那么大家又抱怨了，这次呢他提早了，3月17号这个8点钟之前才能卖，8点钟以后全部关不允许卖酒了。所以这个他说主要是看到了过往的这个经验教训，看到了更多的这个获得新冠都是通过喝酒，大家放松了警惕。那么同时呢，我们是要希望于疫苗来保护我们更多的人，那么我们才可以考虑这个疫情之后如何开启。所以我们还是要保持每一个安全措施。我们还是要这个利用保护措施来保护自己。那么现在呢，还是10个人了，10个人，室外10个人。如果你们想见别人的话，那么就到室外去见。
And I know where I come from, we have a saying that common suffering builds strong bonds. And I think all of us can relate to that over this past year. I certainly recognize and acknowledge that we've all experienced losses this past year. Some of them are an accumulation of tiny losses of those joys, those things that we had in our lives. And for some people, it's the tragic loss of a loved one, whether from COVID or whether from other things in this uncertain time. This unrelenting uncertainty that we have all been through together takes its toll, and I know that. Now is the time that we need to reach out again. We need to remember each other. We know that this has been hard, and particularly on our seniors and elders. Connect with them by staying apart and keeping them safe. Connect with the young people in your lives. They have had the least influence and the most impact. We see that in economic data, we see that in school data, we see that in young people having challenges with jobs, having challenges with doing online university. Reach out to the young people in your life. Remember how important it is to hold them close.
他也说不下去了啊！真的，年纪轻的人特别困难，也是。那么
And I'll just stop there. It's been a challenging year for us all, and now is the time again to remember to redouble our efforts, to remember to be kind to each other, because that is what makes a difference. And that is what will make us safe. Thank you.
也是我们也是值得同情年纪轻的人。你限制他们这个，限制他们那个我们都是年纪轻的人过来的，可能中西文化呢又不一样，年纪轻的人特别活跃又特别的那个精力充沛特别的想与人交往，要社交所以老外特别是老外特别喜欢社交这个我不像我们华人有一个手机有一个 Internet 就可以了，有个微信有个电视剧无所谓了老外你看，所以这个去年到现在为止有多少的过物药物过量死亡就是这个意思。那么这个卫生厅长也是在对这个刚才大家总结一下大家这个一个失去亲人的困难，第二个就是这个
who passed away from COVID-19 since the beginning of the pandemic. We are thinking of them today, particularly on this one-year anniversary, of many people because they know an individual who's passed away, who has had a significant loss during COVID-19, are affected by this. But all of us, I think, have those people who've suffered this loss in their hearts. I wanted to note a couple of things about vaccines and immunization clinics, and just to bring you up to date on appointments that are booked. That number as of noon today was 49,761 across health authorities. That's 20,984 in Fraser Health. 7,889
29000多则是在飞沙，7000多是延安。这个就是到目前为止4天49000多个人已经预约了。我认识一个老邻居，91岁的老太太，那么她的儿子呢还没有帮她预约，她说她的老公比她小3岁，所以这个也是一个实际的情况，就是夫妻2个都是在这个界限，一个界限内，一个界限外。那对老年人来讲，出去打一个针，要请这个人帮忙，请那个人帮忙，所以都是问题。所以她说，老太太说，我宁可等到下礼拜88岁的老公这个年龄段开放预约了，我和他一起预约。这个真的是面对的现实问题，我们这个体会不到，所以他们做政府的，他们做管理的，应该是各个因素都考虑到。各个层面都要考虑到。
We are hopeful that all of those people, or as many as possible, can phone and book appointments in the next few days. I wanted to note, and this is more important than all of that, that 22,698 people over the age of 90 so far in Phase 1 and Phase 2 of our immunization plan have been immunized, have received their vaccine, either their Pfizer or Moderna vaccine, that a further 28,431 people between the ages of 80 and 89 have received their vaccine. This has happened in long-term care homes and assisted living, in independent living homes, and people receiving long-term home support. And obviously it shows the progress that has been made, progress that will be dramatically increased next week as we begin our immunization for the general population across British Columbia. I want to thank again everyone involved in that process for their work. This morning I'll note that we added, and we're adding information, our weekly report on outbreaks in long-term care, assisted living, and independent living. And note that in long-term care this past week, we've had 12 new test positive cases of residents in long-term care. The overwhelming majority of them, I believe 11, are at the Cottonwoods facility in Kelowna.
那么在科罗纳呢有一个爆发，有11个人这个长期护理院
only 6 outbreaks in long-term care.
在这个长期护理院，这个是很吃惊的。
Not as significant as it was some time ago, but it is important to know that that is available for everyone on
也让每个人引起重视。这个里边呢，我是大家可以 BCCDC 看到有一个这个说实话。这个11个为什么会获得的呢？也就是这个疫苗针打完要2星期以后才慢慢有效这个里边才产生的一个问题。
Just bring you up to date very briefly on 2 programs that have been related to COVID-19: the surgical renewal commitment, which is continuing, of course, since it was relaunched on May 18th. We've completed, health authorities have completed 74,386 surgeries in Fraser Health. 50,469 in Interior Health, 15,446 in Northern Health, 64,829 in Vancouver Coastal Health, and 56,515 in Vancouver Island Health, and 10,930 by the Provincial Health Services Authority. For the week of February 22nd to 28th, health authorities have verified their data, and the total number of surgeries completed was 7,446, and that is 420 more surgeries in the same week last year, 420 more in a time when COVID protocols and the need for safety has put new challenge in front of our healthcare professionals and our healthcare workers, and I want to thank them for this ongoing effort. I was asked for an update on the programs to support senior services in BC. I note that since July 1st, 2020, the province has hired 1,441 FTEs to support visitation and infection control in long-term care. Of that part of the program, that's 91% of the allocation. Further, the 745 FTEs have now accepted job offers in the HCAP program, so we are making progress on our goal in the over the next few years to hire 7,000 net new healthcare workers. So I wanted to just conclude very simply by saying that this is what we know, that 279,782 British Columbians have received their first dose of vaccine. That's 6.51% of us who've received the shot. We know it takes up to 21 days for that first dose to reach maximum effectiveness. We know that while vaccines are not 100% effective, and we see that, we also know that these vaccines that we've had in British Columbia to deal with COVID-19 are some of the most effective vaccines that have really ever been produced. We know that with vaccines, it's tempting to ease off behaviors and actions that stop the spread, to do what we want and not what we must. But the science and the message are clear. They were clear in the modeling presented by Dr. Henry. We must continue to use the skills we've been taught, especially as we modify our routines in adapting to guidelines and public health orders as they evolve. Until we have developed the community immunity we are hopeful for from the vaccine, our journey is simply not over, not close to over.
他一再说了啊，我们对病毒的这个斗争远了没有结束，疫苗还没有每个人都打，所以我们继续保持警惕啊，让我们已经1年下来的努力不要付之一炬，让我们继续的保持警惕啊，这个维持。拉低这个曲线
and the opportunities lost and all the things that we do together that have been lost, but also what it shows about British Columbia, how generous we've been with one another, how much each of us has contributed to this effort, and the difference that it has made for people. I, for one, am extraordinarily grateful to everyone watching and everyone else in our province who has stepped up for the ones they've loved and stepped up for the ones they don't know. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
连说了3遍，谢谢你们，谢谢你们，也就是求你们了，求你们了，求你们了啊！已经到了这个阶段，就像上次伯尼医生说了，我们已经看到了隧道的曙光了，马上就隧道的尽头的灯光我们都看到了，但我们远没有到，所以呢，我们远没有这个放松的时间，没有啊，所以大家疫苗就算来了，还没有轮到每个人打，所以千万大家别放弃，一定要再坚持啊！再坚持几个礼拜，哪怕坚持几个月，这个就是这个意思。
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. We're happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Minister. As a reminder to everybody on the phone line, please press *1 to enter the queue. You're limited to one question and one follow-up. I would also ask that you please take your phones off mute. You're not audible until your name is called. First question today is from Keith Baldry, Global News.
Thank you very much, Dr. Henry, and thank you very much for every briefing for the past year. It's been quite extraordinary. I just want to ask, given our frustrating inability to get our daily case numbers down, we've been stuck at that 500 level for some time. What is the rationale for easing restrictions, even slightly, of having gatherings outdoors of up to 10 people?
那么他也是说到了，为什么现在新增的数量还是500多个？为什么现在开始慢慢放松了？室外的允许10个人了？啊，这里边的逻辑是什么？
It's a little bit of all of those, yes. You know, we know where the riskiest settings are. We know that it is when we're indoors, when we're crowded situations, when we're close to others, and that has been the focus of trying to the measures that we have in place in many indoor settings. But I also recognize that the transmissibility decreases. We're hoping that continues through the spring, and that it is important after these months that we have put to trying to prevent the spread, that we need to have focus on some of the things we can do and can do safely, and outdoors is where we need to focus right now. So being able to have those important connections that we need, but do them in a way that's not going to put people at risk, and the people that we are closest to, the people that we love at risk, and we need those opportunities, particularly for young people over this coming March break. So find ways to go explore in your neighborhood. Find ways to go to a park with some friends, to connect in ways that aren't going to make things difficult, but then focus again when you're back indoors on the things that we know will prevent the spread. So wearing masks, making sure you're not going if you're sick, making sure that you do keep your groups small. Go with your family or your household to the restaurant. Keep those distances. Make sure you're not putting others at this because part of what we do around the orders is try and have as few as possible, but also making sure that we're not overwhelming our public health system. And we have and still have concerns about the variants, but we're watching them and we're controlling them, and we can safely go outside as long as we're taking those extra precautions in the other parts of our life, and we have the public health resources to do the case management, making sure people can effectively isolate, and we can support you to do that, and the contact tracing and contact follow-up that we need to do. So that's what we're focusing on, recognizing that we're in this tenuous place right now, and that we need to get through until April. And if we can do that, and we can do that safely with each other over the next few weeks. So what we do now is going to affect what happens in the next few weeks. Then we can look at what we can do in April as well. So yes, it is a little bit of all of that. We need this now, but we need to do it in a way and focus on the things that are safe for us to do outside.
重点是在室外，没有希望大家还是能够更加注意室内的，室外呢，慢慢还是大家走出去。为什么都是回应这么大？
Yeah, so I know Interior Health is looking at that very carefully, and yes, there was most people, most of the residents were vaccinated, but we also know there's turnover in long-term care homes. People come in, people come out for different reasons, and they are offering again immunization. And there were a certain percentage of the staff we understand who weren't available or didn't receive it in the first couple of times they went through. But that is, of course, paying attention to that, and to all long-term care home staff. Many people, and we understand this, long-term care home staff were people who were first in line for vaccine, and many had concerns. They had legitimate questions about these new vaccines, and we are now addressing them. We now have more confidence. We now know that many more of us have had the vaccine and that it is safe. And whereas there are many questions that are circulating that we're addressing every day. So I think I know Interior Health is working with the community and with the care home to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to be immunized now, and that we get those rates up to where we need them to be to protect people.
Next question is from Lisa Yusta, News 1130.
I wonder about the variants. The full picture of variants, but people were getting lists of what variants were in schools and what schools were affected. I'm wondering why that isn't happening anymore, and will that happen again?
Yeah, so what we have found is that most of the exposure events that we're seeing in schools, all of the exposure events we're seeing in schools reflect what's going on in the community, and so most of them are not exposures with the variants. When we first saw this, we needed to pay attention and understand whether we were going to see increased transmission from those variants in a school setting. That was really important for us to understand, and we've done quite a lot of testing around all of the exposure events that we've known so far, and we're not seeing that rapidly exploding outbreaks that we've seen people describe in other places, which is reassuring. It's not perfect, and nothing that we do is, but we are learning about it. And we're now learning that these variants are not causing a difference from the other strains that we're seeing. And as we can see, they're a small percentage of what we're seeing. So we are continuing to report exposure events, and it's become apparent to us that we don't need to do things differently just because it's a variant or not. The other thing that I think is important is that the schools that have been most affected have been in the Fraser Health region. That's where we've seen most of the variant cases, but that's also where we're seeing most of our cases of the virus spreading in the community right now. So that is important for us to know. Those are the places we need to pay meticulous attention to adhering to our safety plans. And we'll continue to report exposure events, clusters, and outbreaks as we have been in the school system going forward. And it was, I understand,
是让大家格外的引起重视这个学校这个传播这个变异病毒的这个场所这个社区的脆弱性。
The activities that are taken with the school community when exposure happens.
Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Yes. When you're talking about these gatherings of 10 people, spring break coming up, can you be a little more prescriptive, if possible, about what parents can do, what they can do? People are going to want to do sleepovers. They're going to want to have.
那么他说10个人的禁令现在是10个人了，那么能不能再详细一点？大家可以过夜啊，等等哪些可以做，哪些不可以做，哪些可以可以见面，可以哪些不可以？
And absolutely. And let's be clear, sleepovers indoors are
他们说让我再讲清楚 ，sleepover 这个过夜是室内的行为这个是禁止的。
And we've seen that. We've seen birthday parties with
我
less
们已经
than
看
10
到了很
people
多
where
了，
somebody
就算小于10个人的室内的生日聚会都在传播病毒。所以我们一定要找到一个办法，就是大家年纪轻的人、孩子们如何让他们联系在一起，但是呢，必须在室外这个最多是10个人。
we've talked with it. There's nothing scientific about it.
这个没有科学的依据这个是主要是让大家人越少越好那么主要是2个家庭就可以了，10个人差不多那么大家在室外的，大家在公园里边在野餐大家可以距离远一点野餐，或者呢大家可以唱唱歌见见面所以希望大家都在室外，不要就去室内。
So let's find some opportunities to have games outside, to get together and kick a soccer ball around with some of your friends in the park. Those are the types of things that we can do now safely. But remember, if we're not feeling well, stay home. If you don't avoid it, put those parties that are indoors that we want to have the sleepovers and the indoor play dates until the summer. We'll get there.
那么这个呢还是夏天去做吧我们会到这个天的，所以我们现在还是大家在室外长凳里边晒呀晒晒，喝喝咖啡呀这个是我们鼓励的，鼓励大家这么去做的如果你有这些疑虑顾虑你不用出去了你如果觉得有这个风险那你戴个口罩你都可以做希望大家还是要这个安全的保持社交的距离。
Some of the things to think about now.
Next question is from Shannon Waters, BC Today.
Hi there. I'm hoping, Dr. Henry, that you might be able to provide a little more context on people who are dealing with long-lasting symptoms due to COVID. In the briefing, you talked about, people who are being impacted by this disease.
听不清楚包尼医生听得清楚，我们这边听不清楚这个 echo 太厉害了。
either by long-lasting symptoms due to a COVID infection or by other health impacts due to the disease.
Yeah, so, those things are, the clinical data is something that is challenging. There's no single place that we have the information on everybody who's been infected. But we do have a number of clinics in communities, particularly in the Lower Mainland where the majority of cases have been, and they are collecting that ongoing information and working with, in the study scenario, being able to understand what sort of things work to help people get through those long symptoms that people are experiencing. But yes, that's not something that we have ready available information for everybody that's been affected. We do have a number of programs that are set up to support people, and I know there's several hundred people that are involved in those. And we're looking at the literature from around the world to help us understand what are the common symptoms. The things that we do know are the people who have more
这么做一个，这个是第5篇就几百个了。上次这个卫生厅长说，为了这个跟踪接触工作已经额外招了1200多个了。
We don't know how long it lasts for some people. We know that it's months now for many people, but we've only known about this virus for a little over a year. So some of that is still trying to be understood both here in BC, across Canada, and with study groups around the world.
我们现在世界上也有一些这个科学家小组都在研究这个病毒。
Information and research coming out of other jurisdictions suggests that approximately 10% of people who are infected with COVID will have these long-lasting symptoms. Other estimates indicate that for people whose illness is severe enough to require hospitalization, that number could be as high as 30%. Given the way BC's cases are going these days, that would be upwards of 50 people a day developing long-lasting symptoms. In your daily briefings, you generally mention how many people are considered recovered. The health minister has suggested that you're also providing information on people experiencing long-lasting symptoms. I haven't been able to find that information, but I'm wondering at this point, do you agree with do you think BC is seeing similar numbers to what is coming out of other jurisdictions? And do you have a plan at this point to start providing this information, given we've now been in the pandemic for a year?
Yeah, so as I said, that's not the information that we actually
这个记者问的是他能不能公布那个信息啊？我没完全听清楚，这个回音太厉害。那么他解释一下，这个信息我们没办法提供。
individuals who are going through this, whether it's in hospital, the ICU, and their family physicians, and now the series of clinics that we've set up. Those are the people that are collecting that information to help us understand for the population here, and they're connecting with the same types of study groups that are happening around the world, where we're trying to get a better understanding. We don't yet have a standard definition of what we're talking about, so when we look at some of the studies, and I read these as well to try and understand, they are looking sometimes at different people. We know that anybody who is in the ICU, there's a period of time of recovery that can last a long time, no matter what the cause was of them being in the ICU. So it's unclear yet if it is directly related to COVID or if it's related to the trauma that happens when you're in a life-threatening condition that requires you to have intubation or to be in the intensive care unit. So these are all phenomena that are being addressed by the clinicians. And we will be part of all of those studies both here in BC and across the country to put together that picture over time. So I don't have that data. It's not like we're not sharing it. It's we don't know. We don't have any means of following up on every individual person's recovery over time. So those are the things that, yes, it's part of an ongoing research and study, as well as providing clinics where people can get the support that they need.
YouTube 平台也是大家也是
Next question is from Katie DeRosa, Vancouver Sun.
这个级别，所以也不要对别人要求怎么样。
You can talk about the investigation going on in the European Union related to the AstraZeneca vaccine and a small number of blood clots. Does that concern you, or will you be looking for advice from NAS? What will BCC doing, considering the immunization committee is considering how to deploy this vaccine to frontline workers?
Right. Yes, and absolutely. We've been following that very closely, particularly Denmark and Finland were the two areas of concern, and Switzerland had some issues as well. So this is part of what we do, the adverse events following immunization. It's understanding what happens in every single individual in the period of time after they receive their immunization. And it's part of the information that we provide as well. It's on the through the BC CDC. We have a system that does that. We have not seen any of those types of issues here in BC, although we've only just started using the AstraZeneca AstraZeneca vaccine. I will also say that we look at everything by lot number, and that was what was the issue in Denmark in particular, and also in Switzerland. It was a particular lot number where they had very small numbers of events, so it was 2 people and 3 people from what I understand. We were on a call this morning with the regulator, Health Canada, and with our special advisory committee and our Health Canada, our regulator is sharing information with the regulators from EMEA, from the European Union to understand this. We see this frequently with new products, new vaccines, that if there's a safety signal that comes up that's related to a specific lot number, we put a hold on that until those can be investigated. But what we understand is there's several different types of events that happened. So a blood clot in the lungs, a blood clot in the legs, a heart attack. And the investigators look at each individual one and make a determination of whether it's related to the vaccine or not. We also look at where else has the vaccine been used, and there's been millions of doses, tens of millions of doses now being used in the UK, for example, and these same safety signals have not happened there. So yes, we are watching this very carefully. It is something that is not unexpected when a new product, a new vaccine is used in large numbers of people. We do not have any of the lot numbers that were concerned in those countries, and the product that we have in British Columbia is from the Serum Institute of India right now, and there are no safety signals associated with the product we have here. But we will, of course, continue to monitor that very closely.
Yes, please. Ontario and Alberta have rolled out the AstraZeneca vaccine being delivered in pharmacies. Is that something that BC is considering as it rolls out this dose to the general public?
Yes, absolutely. We have been partners in immunization with pharmacists since 2009, actually, with the influenza pandemic. And we are looking at, especially now that AstraZeneca, and hopefully when we get the Johnson vaccine, these are fridge-stable vaccines. So that means we can use them in much more targeted and tailored ways, and we don't need special equipment. Having said that, right now, with the limited amount that we got in this week, we have made the decision here in BC to target the areas where we are confident it can make the most difference in protecting our communities, and that is around workplaces where we're seeing clusters and outbreaks and high-risk workplaces. I mentioned earlier that we have a team that's been working on trying to understand what measures need to be in place in workplaces that lead to outbreaks, and some of them that where we've seen large outbreaks are in places like food processing, where people have to work quite closely together, where wearing PPE can be awkward and it can get messed up with the types of activities you're doing, where barriers are not easy, and also where people may not have the agency to not go into work when they're feeling ill because they need to work to support their families. They may live in group accommodation settings in some places, or multi-generational large family homes. So these are the places where we know outbreaks right now are spilling over into our community and causing clusters and outbreaks in other settings in the community and in homes and families. So we are targeting the initial doses that we have to those settings, and pharmacists are partnering with us in some places. It is we've created a list of criteria with the medical health officers around the province. The 3 areas we're focusing on are the food processing industry, because we know that those are high-risk industries. We're looking at some of the large industrial camps where we have people by necessity traveling in and out to different parts of BC and back and forth into the camps. They live in congregate accommodations, and we know that there's been outbreaks that have spilled over into our communities in BC. And also some of the farm operations and nurseries where we also have workers who are living in crowded accommodations, including our temporary farm workers. So that's our focus right now, and we'll be using a number of different means to immunize people in those settings, and we are confident that that will help us protect our communities as well as those workplaces and the people in the workers in those workplaces at the same time. So that's our strategy for the first part, and then we'll be looking at, as we are expecting more of the vaccine in April, we'll be looking at how do we roll it out from there, and that's what the committee is providing advice to us on in the coming days.
Tom Zatarek, Surrey Now leader.
Hi, Dr. Henry. Will you be permitting the annual Vaisakhi parade in Surrey to go ahead this year?
他问了，就你能不能同意允许今年树立的一个这个和活动能不能批准？他也笑了，现在还太早，我们还没有这个决定，我还没有想过。树立有一个光明节嘛，这个印度人的，他说
and the last couple of weeks about how we have a number of important celebrations coming up.
我们现在还没有一些这个重要的节日决定，我们还没有决定。
How can we have safe
我们现在要考虑，我们如果又要安全，又这些庆祝这些重要的节日，我们可能也是在室外的很有限的方式去做。
But how can we have celebrations? And we've seen some great examples of that with Chinese New Year's.
我们已经看到了中国青年来大家是怎么庆祝的，如何安全的去庆祝。所以我也希望大家接下来的这些这个庆祝活动也像庆祝中国新年那样去。
Given the magnitude of this event, I mean, we've got 500,000 people congregating on a city street. Do you see even this parade being able to go ahead as it has in years past, even next year?
Okay, for this year, that's a no.
今年不会不允许什么半个城市的人大家聚集在这个街道里边庆祝这个节日。但明年不知道，现在所以都不知道明年是怎么办。
That's not going to, it cannot happen this year.
我们不允许今年还是这么发生不可能那么多人去置于风险当中。今年还不允许。就是这个每年呢，如果大家有这个树理生活的经验的话，大家都知道树理每年印度人有一个光明节。
For updated province-wide restrictions, visit gov.bc.ca/COVID restrictions, and for information about the province's orders and pandemic supports, visit gov.bc.ca/COVID-19. Last question today is from Tanya Fletcher, CBC.
Dr. Henry, can you specify what the direction is for travel right now, especially over spring break?
那么今年的春假，你对这个旅游限制有没有？
So when can households travel around BC again?
是不是还是在 BC 省内旅游
I'm not sure I suggested loosening of anything, but
我不知道我是不是做了重要的信息给你们我们没有放松还是一样的，希望大家都在本地也是支持本地的社区，支持本地的生意。那么就算你这个3月春假我们也是希望大家都在本省旅行。我们实际上还是大家以家庭为单位。
travel, and we need to be very aware. We looked at the local health area data that's published on the BC CDC website.
我们都可以看到，在 BC CDC 的网页上都看到了各个卫生局的新增数字都看到了，都是旅行获得的数据都是这个到高风险地区到低风险区或者是有到这个去访问一个人，结果一下子就把这个社区给传染过去了。所以这个也是置你于风险。至于其他人也风险，所以我们始终记住，我们就 stay local 我们就是要还是非基本非必要旅行就不要旅行了这个记者问的还是好问题肯定的，还没有旅行开放。我们这个低陆平原都是高风险地区。
Revisiting a question you were asked earlier, this morning on CBC's Morning Show in Kelowna, Dr. Carol Fenton from Interior Health said that 35% of staff at the Cottonwoods Care Home, which is the site of a current outbreak, refused to be vaccinated. So it doesn't sound like turnover is the issue according to that. So what message do you have to care homeworkers who refuse vaccination? And members of the public who are asking us whether the vaccination of healthcare workers should be mandatory.
是不是疫苗是要强制去打？
You know, I think maybe refused was an unfortunate use of the term. We know there are many reasons why healthcare workers may not have been immunized, and as I mentioned early on, people had a lot of questions, and that's very legitimate. And we have done our best to try and answer those questions and increase confidence in these vaccines. They are safe, they work. But people, and we were talking last night on CBC, they have questions. They have questions about, does it affect me if I'm thinking of getting pregnant? Does it affect me if I'm breastfeeding? Does it affect me if, does it have effects on my future fertility? These were all questions that were a lot more top of mind for people early on when we started these immunization programs. And as we're learning because we now have tens of millions of doses around the world that have been put into people. We understand the reactions to them. We understand some of the medium term, and we get more information about longer term impacts. So the initial advice that came out was if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, to not get the vaccine. We now know that it is safe. We've got more information on people who received the vaccination when they were pregnant, when they were breastfeeding, and we've not seen any safety signals. We have more information on how the vaccines work, and we are confident that they don't have long-term effects on people's fertility. We know that people are unnecessarily very concerned and very cautious about taking anything if they're pregnant. We now know as well from work that was done here, talking about clinical follow-up of people. Dr. Deb Money has been leading a study across the country looking at the effects of COVID-19 on pregnancy and on babies, and we know that there is an increased risk for people who are pregnant to have more severe COVID disease, and it can have effects on their pregnancy. So with that, it's a different risk-benefit balance that we now know tips in the favor of receiving the vaccine. So with more information, we are encouraging more people to be immunized, that it can protect you safely if you're pregnant or if you're thinking of being pregnant, that breastfeeding should not be a deterrent to being immunized. And so those are things that evolve over time as we're learning more about these vaccines. And so I encourage all healthcare workers. It is important for all of us, for our own protection, but also for the protection of our communities and our families, and to show that example of the support for the vaccinations, the safe and effective vaccines that we have. None of our vaccine programs in Canada or in BC are mandatory, and I don't believe this one needs to be either. We know it's an important protection measure for us as individuals, as healthcare workers, but the other thing with this vaccine, which
Dr. Bonnie Henry answering the last question of today's press conference. At times very emotional. She and Health Minister Adrian Dick.
好，那么我再把今天新增的数字报告大家。今天24小时里边，过去24小时新增了是569例，那么累计就是86219例。那其中住院是244例。住院的是244例，68例在重症监护了。那么很遗憾，有3例死亡，总计到了1397例。好了，各位观众，今天的 BC 省新冠疫情新闻简报就为大家介绍到这儿，直播到这儿，我们下星期一再会，感谢大家的